Let me tell you a story about two men who couldn't be more different. The first man is Ronald Reed. Ronald was a janitor. He fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years and swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years. He was born in rural Vermont, the first in his family to graduate high school. He lived a tiny, quiet life. He bought a small two-bedroom house for $12,000 at age 38 and lived there until he died. His main hobby was chopping firewood. When Ronald died in 2014 at age 92, he made international headlines. Why? Because this humble janitor had a secret. In his will, he left $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. Now, meet the second man, Richard Fuscone. Richard was everything Ronald was not. He was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive. He had an MBA. He was so successful in finance that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. Business magazines listed him in their 40 under 40 list of successful people. He lived in an 18,000 square foot mansion in Connecticut with 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, and 2 pools. It cost $90,000 a month just to maintain the house. But then, everything fell apart. In 2008, the financial crisis hit, and while the janitor, Ronald Reed, was quietly compounding his millions, the Harvard executive, Richard Fuscone, went bankrupt. He told the judge, "I have no income." His mansion was foreclosed and sold for pennies on the dollar. How is this possible? In what other industry does a janitor with no education massively outperform a Harvard genius? It doesn't happen in medicine. A janitor can't perform heart surgery better than a doctor. It doesn't happen in engineering. A janitor can't design a skyscraper better than an architect. But it happens in finance. And the reason it happens is the subject of today's video. It's because doing well with money isn't about how smart you are, it's about how you behave. Welcome back to Rick Summary, the channel where books are simplified into powerful life lessons. We take the world's best ideas and turn them into stories that stick. Today, we are diving deep into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. This isn't a book about spreadsheets or stock tips. It's a book about the strange, messy, and emotional relationship we all have with money. If you want to master your wealth, you don't need a higher IQ. You need to understand your own mind. The premise of this book is simple but profound. Financial success is a soft skill, not a hard science. We're taught that money is like physics, that there are laws and rules, and if you just plug the numbers into the formula, you get the right answer. But finance isn't physics, it's psychology, it's emotion, it's fear, greed, pride, and envy. Let's start with a realization that will make you stop judging other people's financial choices. Morgan Housel writes that no one is crazy. People do crazy things with money, sure. They buy lottery tickets when they're broke, they sell stocks when the market crashes, they take out mortgages they can't afford, but no one is actually crazy. Here is why. Your personal experience with money makes up maybe 0.0000001% of what's happened in the world, but it makes up 80% of how you think the world works. If you were born in 1970, the stock market went up tenfold during your teens and 20s. You learned that the market is a wealth-generating machine. But if you were born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere during your teens and 20s. You learned that the stock market is a place where money goes to die. Neither person is wrong, they just experienced different worlds. Think about the person who grew up in the Great Depression. They might hoard cash under their mattress. To you, that looks paranoid. To them, it looks like survival because they saw their neighbors starve. Or think about lottery tickets. We might look at a low-income worker spending $400 a year on lottery tickets and think, that's a waste, they should save that money. But try to see it through their lens. They live paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford a nice house or a vacation. They have no way to get ahead. Buying a lottery ticket is the only time they get to buy a dream. It's the only time they can feel what it's like to have hope. We don't have to agree with it, but we have to understand it. We are all victims of our own history. We are all making decisions based on a unique mental model that makes sense to us at that moment. So the first step to mastering the psychology of money is to realize that you are not a spreadsheet, you are a person, and you have biases that you need to be aware of. Now, let's go back to the author's own story. Before Morgan Housel was a writer, he worked as a valet at a luxury hotel in Los Angeles. This was in the mid-2000s. People would drive up in Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Rolls-Royces. Housel admits that when he saw these cars, he was mesmerized. He would stare at the Ferrari and imagine himself driving it. He thought, if I had that car, people would think I'm important. They would think I'm successful. They would admire me. But then he realized something shocking. When a Ferrari pulled up, he never looked at the driver. He didn't care about the guy behind the wheel. He didn't know his name, didn't care about his success, and didn't admire him. He was just looking at the car and imagining himself in the driver's seat. This is called the man in the car paradox. We tend to buy expensive things, fancy cars, big houses, luxury watches, because we want respect and admiration from others. We think that if we have the stuff, people will look at us and say, "Wow, look at him, he made it." But they don't. They are looking at your stuff and using it as a mirror to imagine themselves owning it. They are bypassing you completely. This is a hard pill to swallow. Almost everyone wants respect, but using money to buy fancy things is the least effective way to get it. If you want respect, you get it through kindness, humility, and intelligence. Horsepower and chrome won't get you there. And this leads us to the most dangerous trap in finance, the difference between being rich and being wealthy. We use these words interchangeably, but they are not the same. Rich is a current income. It's what you see. When you see someone driving a $100,000 car, the only thing you know for sure is that they have $100,000 less than they did before they bought the car, or they have $100,000 more in debt. Rich is loud, it's visible, it's the Instagram photo. Wealth is hidden. Wealth is the income that is not spent. Wealth is the nice car not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the first-class upgrade declined. Wealth is financial assets that haven't yet been converted into the stuff you see. But the problem is that because wealth is hidden, it's hard to imitate. We see the rich guy spending money, so we think that's what success looks like. We say, "I want to be a millionaire," but what we really mean is, "I want to spend $1 million," and that is literally the opposite of being a millionaire. The janitor, Ronald Reed, was wealthy. He had millions in the bank, but no one saw it. The executive, Richard Fuscone, was rich. He had the mansion and the lifestyle, but he had no wealth, no unspent assets to catch him when the income stopped. The world is filled with people who look modest but are actually wealthy, and people who look rich but are living on the razor edge of insolvency. Be careful who you admire. So how do we actually build this hidden wealth? Is it about finding the perfect stock? Is it about timing the market? Let's look at the master himself, Warren Buffett. More than 2,000 books have been written about how Warren Buffett built his fortune. They talk about his strategy, his value investing, his genius for picking companies. But few of them mention the most important fact. Warren Buffett started investing when he was 10 years old. As of the writing of this book, Buffett's net worth is roughly $84.5 billion. But here is the crazy part. $81.5 billion of that came after his 65th birthday. Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine Warren Buffett was a normal person. Imagine he spent his teens and 20s exploring the world and didn't start investing until he was 30. Let's say he started with $25,000, and let's say he still earned his incredible returns of 22% a year, but then let's say he retired at age 60 to play golf. What would his net worth be today? Not $84 billion, it would be roughly $11.9 million. That is 99.9% less than his actual net worth. The secret to Buffett's success isn't just that he's a good investor, it's that he's been a good investor for 75 years. His secret is time. This brings us to the concept of compounding. Our brains are not built to handle exponential growth. We think linearly. If I ask you to calculate 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, you can do it in seconds. But if I ask you to calculate 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, your head explodes. We underestimate what happens when money is left alone to grow.
Think about the Ice Ages. For a long time, scientists couldn't figure out what caused the Earth to freeze over. They were looking for huge disasters, meteor impacts, or volcanoes. But it turns out it wasn't a disaster. It was a tiny change in the Earth's tilt. This tiny tilt meant that the summers got just a little bit cooler, not freezing, just cool enough that the snow from the winter didn't completely melt. That leftover snow reflected more sunlight, which made the next winter colder, which left more snow, which reflected more light. Over thousands of years, that tiny layer of leftover snow grew into ice sheets miles thick. You don't need tremendous force to create tremendous results. You just need something to compound. The most powerful book on investing should just be one page with a chart of compound interest and a title that says, "Shut up and wait." Good investing isn't about earning the highest returns. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with for the longest period of time. That is when the magic happens. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. But waiting is hard. Staying in the game is hard. And this leads to the most important distinction in the book. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are two completely different skills. Getting wealthy requires taking risks. It requires optimism. It requires putting yourself out there. Staying wealthy requires the exact opposite. It requires fear. It requires humility. It requires a survival mindset. It requires knowing that what you made can be taken away from you in an instant. Let's go back to the Great Depression for another story. Jesse Livermore was the greatest stock trader of his day. In 1929, the stock market crashed. It was chaos. Wall Street bankers were jumping out of windows. Jesse came home to his wife, who was crying, terrified that they were ruined. But Jesse Livermore had bet against the market. He was short. In one single day, while everyone else lost everything, he made the equivalent of $3 billion. He was the richest man in the world. But remember, getting rich and staying rich are different skills. Jesse Livermore was a risk taker. He was aggressive. That's how he got rich. But he couldn't switch gears. He felt invincible. He kept making bigger and bigger bets. 4 years later, he had lost everything. He went broke, disappeared for 2 days, and eventually, tragically, took his own life. He was a genius at getting rich, but a failure at staying rich. If you want to survive in the long run, you need room for error. You have to plan on your plan not going according to plan. This is what Benjamin Graham called the margin of safety. It means you don't leverage yourself to the hilt. It means you keep cash on the sidelines, even if it's earning zero interest. Why? Because cash is the oxygen of independence. Cash prevents you from having to sell your stocks in a crash. If you are fully invested and you lose your job during a recession, you might be forced to sell your stocks at the bottom just to pay for groceries. You interrupt the compounding. You lose. But if you have cash, if you have room for error, you can survive the storm. You don't have to sell. You can let your assets recover. The most important goal in finance is not to maximize returns. It is to become financially unbreakable. Because if you are unbreakable, you can stick around long enough for compounding to work its wonders. Tails, you win. There is another reason why survival is so critical. It's because of how winning actually works in the real world. Housel calls this tails, you win. In finance, a small number of events account for the majority of outcomes. These are the tail events, the outliers. Look at business. There are millions of companies. Most fail. A few do okay. And a tiny, tiny percentage become Amazon, Apple, or Google. These few companies drive almost all the returns of the stock market. Look at Warren Buffett again. He has owned 400 to 500 stocks during his life, but he made the vast majority of his money on just 10 of them. If you remove his top investments, his track record is actually pretty average. This is a liberating idea. It means you can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. You don't need to be right every time. You just need to make sure that when you are wrong, you don't lose everything. You need to survive your bad bets so you are still in the game when the winning tail event comes along. Disney is a perfect example. In the mid-1930s, Walt Disney Studio was struggling. They had produced 400 cartoons. Most lost money. They were drowning in debt. Then they tried one crazy thing, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It made $8 million in the first 6 months. In 1938, that was an insane amount of money. That one movie paid off all the debts, bought the new studio, and set them up for decades. The 400 failures didn't matter. The one tail event paid for everything. Your portfolio works the same way. You will buy dud stocks. You will make bad investments. That is normal. Don't beat yourself up. As long as you don't get wiped out, the few winners will eventually overshadow all the losers. So why are we doing all this? Why save? Why invest? Why endure the volatility? Is it to buy the Ferrari? No, we already learned that nobody cares about your car. Is it to have a bigger number on a screen? That gets boring fast. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. Control over your time is the highest dividend money pays. Money gives you options. It gives you the ability to take a sick day without worrying about being fired. It gives you the freedom to leave a job you hate. It allows you to retire when you want, not when you need to. Housel talks about his friend who worked hard, saved a modest amount of money, and then just quit. He became a full-time musician. He wasn't rich in terms of dollars, but he was wealthy in terms of time. He owned his life. There was a study done where they asked elderly Americans what the most important lessons they learned were. Not a single person said, I wish I had worked harder to buy a bigger house. Not one said, I wish I had been as rich as my neighbor. They valued quality friendships. They valued being part of something bigger. And they valued spending unstructured time with their children. If you want to be happy, stop chasing the goalpost. Modern capitalism is great at two things, generating wealth and generating envy. The goalpost will always move. There will always be someone richer than you. You have to define what enough means to you. Enough is not too little. Enough is realizing that the opposite, an insatiable appetite for more, will push you to the point of regret. Don't risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Final takeaway and conclusion. So, what is the final lesson of the psychology of money? It's that you should aim to be reasonable, not rational. A rational person makes decisions based on spreadsheets. A rational person uses 100% leverage because the math says it works. A rational person sells everything when the model says sell. But you are not a robot. You have to sleep at night. A reasonable person saves money just to save with no specific goal because they know the world is unpredictable. A reasonable person pays off their mortgage even if the interest rate is low because the feeling of owning their home gives them peace of mind. A reasonable person accepts that their portfolio will crash sometimes and views that loss not as a mistake but as the fee for admission to the game of wealth. Be nicer to yourself, be less flashy, save your money, wait, survive, and use your wealth to buy your freedom. If you enjoyed this summary and want more powerful book breakdowns, subscribe to Rick's Summary and join the journey. We'll see you in the next story.